Did you know that you can stream the best of HBO shows and more with the new Astro? Better than before, no raid interruptions, no repeats, just stream anytime and on demand via the Astro Ultra Box. It starts from only RM59.90 a month, and you can find out more information at astro.com.my. You're listening to the Goggler Podcast, Bahir and Uma with you, and it's time for Netflix's very first Zack Snyder indulgence. Rebel Moon, Part 1, A Child of Fire. Da-da-da.
I don't think it deserves that. Yeah, no.
This is something that Zack Snyder has been talking about for a very long time. It was a Star Wars pitch, I think, that he made to Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm that was rejected. And then, lo and behold, Netflix comes along and goes, hey, Mr. Snyder, here is hundreds of millions of dollars. Please make this rejected concept into a film for us, or maybe 2 films, or maybe 4 films if you include director's cuts.
Okay.
Before we get into the movie,
Okay.
I want to know, and this is based on the interviews that Zack Snyder has been doing in the lead up to this. He's been going on about how, yes, we're going to get this 2-hour and 15-minute cut of the film on Friday, December 22nd, and then later we're going to get a much longer director's cut, which in his own words is a completely different movie. Apparently, according to him, right?
Yeah.
Now, the reason director's cuts exist, as in, like the historical reason, is usually because of some studio interference, and then you get some kind of a chopped up, butchered version of the film. And so a director like Ridley Scott, for example, comes along and releases a director's cut of Blade Runner because that is true to his original vision of the movie. Here, Zack Snyder is completely unfettered. He has complete control. So why release this film? It's not like Netflix gives a shit how long your movie runs. You can release a 4-hour cut. They have absolutely no problem with it. Just look at the Duffer Brothers and Stranger Things. So why is there a director's cut? If it's a different movie, why not just release that movie?
Because you're not thinking like a studio executive, Uma. Because you said it right at the beginning of this. That means for $166 million, they've just bought themselves 4 Zack Snyder movies that they can talk about 4 times on social media. That's all it is, dude.
You know what the problem is? The problem is we're coming into this a week after a lot of the reviews have dropped, and they have been terrible. And originally, we were like, oh, you know what this means? This means a lot of people are going to hate watch this film after seeing a 9% or a 20% Rotten Tomatoes score. 2 things. One, I think a lot of those reviews underplayed how bad this movie is. And 2, I don't think you're going to get a hate watch because it's so slow and sluggish and painfully boring. I don't think people have the kind of attention to hate watch something like this. Like, this isn't Gigli.
That was a great reference.
Which is a terrible movie, but also a fun hate watch because you can see what a car crash that is.
Yeah.
This just feels like a really long, slow Zack Snyder indulgence.
I'm disappointed that it wasn't a car crash. I was disappointed at mostly how bored I was. I was hoping for a car crash. I was hoping for something I could hate watch. But the hardest thing about this movie was watching this movie because I kept wanting to get distracted. I had to fight the urge to pull out my phone every 3.5 minutes. It took me 3 hours and 20 minutes to watch this 2-hour movie.
Yes, I realized that I had been watching the movie for 2 hours and that I was only an hour into it.
I kept pausing because I kept remembering, oh, maybe I should go pick up that parcel from the gut house. Oh, maybe my cat needs to be fed. Oh, let me just go do something, anything but watch this movie.
This isn't a movie, dude. It's concept art and storyboards that have been green screened and CGI'd to life with absolutely no connective tissue.
I figured it out. You know what this movie is? This movie is the call to action, the movie.
Yes.
This is act 1 of most movies. where the heroes get together. You know, the hero sort of like, oh no, I can't do it, and then does it, and then has to gather his team, but over 2 hours.
And it's not even done in a good way, because even though it's a 2 hour recruitment video for these heroes against the motherland or whatever this world is called, every 20 minutes, the movie comes to a screeching halt because Cora insists on explaining her backstory to anyone who will listen. Literally, every 20 minutes, she will go, "You know, when I was young,
Yeah.
this happened to me. I don't have love. I don't have family. I was the bodyguard. I was the military commander." She just keeps going and going. It's like world building here is the worst kind of exposition.
That's Zack Snyder's idea of character background and character story. That's his idea. His idea of an audience learning about a character is everybody sit down around the fire, let me tell you a story.
And even the recruitments are absolutely terrible.
So fucking easy.
They fly around from place to place. They meet a person who goes, "Who are you? I'm not interested." And then Cora shouts at them for 30 seconds and then they go, "All right, you son of a bitch, I'm in." Like
Yeah.
literally every single person.
Yeah.
She meets Jimon Honsu's character,
That was the worst. That was the worst, can I say?
who has already been introduced to us multiple times up until that point, with her going, "We're going to find General Titus. He's a legend." And then she walks up to him and literally goes, "Are you General Titus, the legend?" What the fuck is that?
But here's my thing, right? Like, even in that recruitment phase of this movie, there's a thing, right? When they go and see Tarek, right? There's this whole thing about like, I must clear my own debt because I'm noble, blah, 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 blah. And also, I'm sorry, spoiler alert, fucking hippogriffs? Really?
Yeah.
Really? Just not even bother to redesign it? No, just a fucking hippogriff. That's it.
Actually, before you continue your thought, this movie is littered with things that he has just stolen from every other franchise, but not even in a smart way.
Not in a smart way. I understand the idea of the hippogriff is cool, but maybe different animals lah. Maybe a hippopotamus and a pigeon. Something, right? Just do a different thing. No. It's a fucking hippogriff. This is where all the hippogriffs have gone, Uma. This is why Earth no longer has hippogriffs. This is where they've gone.
They're all on the rebel moon.
They're all on the rebel moon. Yeah. So anyway, when Korra goes to go and sort of recruit Tarek, there's a whole thing, right? Tarek's cool. He does this thing with the hippogriff. Wow, wee wah. Then they go and see Duna Bay's nemesis, right? Oh, wow, there's this Lord of the Rings, like, spider type thing, right? Okay, cool. Wow, wee wah. She's so cool. Lightsabers. Wow, wee wah. And then they go and see Jimon Honsu. He's just having a bath. I'm sorry, excuse me. He doesn't have a bath. Somebody bathes him because he is this legend fighter guy who's now a drunk by the street, and somebody goes, "So go clean him up," right? And then you watch in slow-mo as this person washes Jimon Honsu, and that's it. That's his thing. And I'm like, really? Like, after all that, at least stick to that, right? At least stick to the cool factor of these people doing things.
All of that setup to the characters is undermined almost immediately. When they meet Tarek, he is supposed to be this noble guy who wants to settle his debt. And sure, he's with this kind of slave trader dude. But then, does he inspire the hippogriff to kill him? And then he goes at a girl?
Yeah.
If you are noble and you want to settle your debt, why go through that? If not, you should have just killed him to begin with.
No, you see, because that's how noble he is. He knows the right thing to do is to kill the slave trader, but he won't do it because he has a debt to the slave trader. So once the debt was cleared, and then because the slave trader was going to do bad by this hippogriff, the hippogriff kills him.
How does Zack Snyder make lightsabers uncool?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's what I don't understand. You're going to use lightsabers. They're there.
Yeah.
She whips out two of them. And yet there is absolutely no impact in that moment. If you watch A New Hope, the first moment in which they unveil the lightsaber, nothing happens. The two of them are just sitting in a room talking, and you immediately go, "Oh shit, that is cool."
You know what it is? It's because of that moment. That's why nobody else can have a lightsaber. The problem is when you try and do a lightsaber, or I'm sorry, light katana, whatever you want to fucking call it, it's no longer cool because you're immediately compared to a lightsaber. Unless your light katana also has I was gonna say also has the spirits of the dead people it's killed. Cannot, because Zack Snyder had no, well, not Zack Snyder, but his friend had done it in Suicide Squad with the other ninja girl, right? So this movie doesn't anger me, but I'm not sure I watched this movie.
Yeah,
I know I sat there for 3 hours to watch a 2 hour movie, but other than bits and bobs, I don't know what the beats of this movie were.
I understand that it's a two-parter, but at the same time, even if you're making a trilogy, a movie needs to have some kind of story arc and narrative and rising tension. This is a recruitment film for the whole entire 2 hours. Even the climactic, and I say that in inverted commas, the climactic battle at the end doesn't necessarily feel like anything. It isn't cool. There isn't any moment that feels earned or actually grows to be as majestic as Zack Snyder wants it to be because he uses a lot of slow mo.
That was it, right? It's because, again, we're using the term climactic here very liberally, only because it's where a climactic battle should have been, but it wasn't in this film. It comes as a surprise. It's like, oh, wait, what? Huh? Oh, here it is. And then they fight, and then it's over, and then you realize you have another 20 minutes to go.
The recruitment stuff in A New Hope happens very quickly. Our heroes get together, then they go defeat the Death Star. The recruitment in Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one, is a perfect example of how you do it. You bring disparate characters together and then you put them in a situation where they grow to be friends and trust each other. And because of that tension, they become a family. Here, none of that happens. So even at the end of the film, when they're all together, you're like, I have no idea why you people like each other.
You've pulled out two good examples that probably don't fit this movie, right? For me, a better example is Lord of the Rings, because these are people who've got separate histories with the big bad trying to come together to do this one thing. And that one thing is very clear. In Lord of the Rings, it's to drop the ring into this volcano. Here, the one thing is clear, is to beat the big bad. However, it's sort of dragged out. This interplanetary species hopping thing that they do is nowhere near as cool as that meeting of Elrond's council, right? If for some odd reason, there's fight sequences here, it happens over the course of an hour and a bit, and yet a bunch of people with beards sitting around a room was way cooler than this.
And what's more, even the big bad they're supposedly fighting is not in the least bit terrifying. Noble is not drawn in a way that is scary at all.
Yeah.
Like, even his entrance at the beginning of the film just feels incredibly underwhelming. A ship lands, the doorway opens, he walks out, and you're like, okay, and then?
That's not even the big bad, right? That's like the general of the big bad. Because the big bad is the one we see right at the end. And even he is unimpressive. When he turns around to the camera, I'm like, really? This guy? you know?
Feels like a bureaucrat.
It's not like a Palpatine, like, he's in a hooded cloak and he's like spewing lightning from his fingertips. No, it's just a guy. I'm like, I mean, sure, you can be strong as like just a normal guy, but draw him better. Draw him more menacingly. Draw him more villainy. This is just a guy in a suit.
Longer is not going to make this movie any better. I don't know what you could possibly add to the director's cut. This entire film is every character telling another character either who they are or what this movie is about. Every time someone encounters someone new, they go, you are the most feared warrior in all the galaxy. You are the assassin that killed 25 people. I mean, yeah, she knows. Thanks. And you know what? We know too, because it's already been mentioned 7 times before.
Yeah.
Even at the very end of the film, when you meet the big bad goes, Korra, she is the fiercest warrior in all the land. I'm like, who talks about someone they already know in that way?
Who talks like that to each other?
Exactly.
Everybody in this room knows what you're talking about. Look, I was there when I killed 25 different people, right? You don't need to tell me I killed 25 people. I know I was there.
The writing is so bad. It barely counts as writing.
Okay, so when we say writing, at any one time, we can mean one of two things, right? Writing being the script writer's writing of the story. What happens, when, where people go, that kind of writing. There's also the writing of dialogue. So when we say writing, we generally mean interchangeably one of these two things. Here, both of them are terrible.
Yeah.
The way people go from A to Z is terrible. There's no reason for these things to happen the way they do. One. Number two, that can be fixed by decent dialogue. You can have a bad way of getting from A to Z if your dialogue fills in the blanks of B through W. The problem is both here are so pedestrian and so, let me use a Malay word, kelam kabut. It's just strange.
And to use a very recent example, people have been complaining about the new Aquaman movie and how it's underwhelming. And when you watch Aquaman, it's an incredibly close parallel. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom also borrows heavily from things like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. It is an incredibly derivative movie, and yet there is such great chemistry between Jason Momoa and Patrick Wilson. There is such fantastic banter between them. There is good world building that it's actually entertaining.
Hmm.
For me, all of this criticism aside, it was the slog that
Yeah.
was the worst. It was so slow and painfully boring. This is a movie that just dripped self indulgent. It was literally Zack Snyder going, "Oh, someone's given me money to do this thing that everyone else rejected. So I get to do whatever I want." And you know what Netflix is in this situation? Netflix is that negligent fucking parent on an airplane that lets their child do whatever they want, scream and shout and kick your seat, and not reprimand that kid at all.
Yeah.
And that is the problem, because that child grows up to be a selfish, arrogant fucking serial killer.
Or Zack Snyder.
Or Zack Snyder.
I mean, I appreciate your anger at this movie. I'm just not as angry, only because I wanted to hate this movie and I didn't, because I was mostly bored and not paying attention.
Well, that's the thing, right?
That's the problem, right?
I'm angry because I had to sit through this for work. Like, it's very rare that I struggle to find something redeeming about a film.
Mm.
And this is one of those movies because, you know what? The CGI is mediocre. The worlds feel a little underbaked. It's not like there was even something remarkably pretty for me to look at.
Mm.
I think about Aquaman and I think about how Atlantis was cool because there were some cool concepts there. There were cool creatures. There were interesting Octobots and all of this stuff. In Rebel Moon, none of these concepts are anything that we haven't seen before in 100 different sci-fi movies.
Yeah.
He wasn't even trying to do anything cool or new with it. When they go to Levitica, or wherever King Levitica is, I can't remember the name of that planet now, but when they go there, it's like a really shitty version of Coruscant.
None of those planets that they go and visit, and they were visiting planets, right?
Oh, they were jumping from planet to planet,
Yeah,
my
okay.
friend.
So they were visiting planets, right? I just wanted confirmation. None of those planets look anything really different from the other. And also, can I say, why is everything nighttime? Just like fucking nighttime everywhere,
It's
right?
all
Like,
night.
if you talk about Star Wars, there's the water planet, there's the desert planet, there's the forest planet. There are visually different things to look at. Here, everything's just nighttime. Everything's just some grimy back alley somewhere.
A very good example, yet again, a parallel between Aquaman and this, just because it's a recent thing that we've seen, both of these have cantina scenes.
Yeah.
And if you look at the execution of that cantina scene, just those few minutes, the scene in Aquaman is very Mos Eisley. There's even the equivalent of a Max Rebo band. There's a fish that looks like Jabba the Hutt. But everything is done tongue-in-cheek. It knows exactly what the homage is. It knows the point of inspiration. It's having fun with it. It moves very, very quickly, and things are done. Here, it's a similar cantina scene. They're there for information. Things go to pot, and they get attacked. And yet, it's so repetitive. Get out of here, you bitch. Oh, I'm going to kill you. Oh, I'm back with more people to kill you. It just keeps going and going. And then it's compounded and made even longer by the stupid slow motion jackass shittery that happens in his movies.
Yeah.
But it's not even cool. A lot of that has to do with Sofia Boutella not having the presence to be a lead. It doesn't work. Combine that with the bad dialogue, Nothing she says actually comes off as being particularly threatening or cool.
As I was watching Rebel Moon, I kept asking myself, why did I like her in Kingsman: The Secret Service? She seemed cool there. She seemed actually villainous. She seemed actually menacing. Here, nothing.
Writing and direction, my friend. Writing and direction.
I mean, I'm comparing a Zack Snyder movie with that so which is a problem, I guess.
I don't know why there is a part two. You could have actually fit all of this into one film.
Why is there a part two is one thing, but why is there a second version of this movie that I'm going to be able to see?
I have absolutely no idea.
If your director's cut of Rebel Moon Part 1 is longer, and it's longer because you have dialogue in there, why isn't dialogue in here? If it's dialogue that's important that you think people should watch, why is it not in this movie? That just boggles my mind. Is it just twice as long, the fight sequences, which means it's not necessary?
There is no way that Netflix doesn't realize this is terrible. I don't think you need critics to tell you that. I think at some point they were just like, we've gone too far. There's no turning back.
This is so reminiscent of that story that recently broke about the guy that spent $55 million or something, money of Netflix that they never made a movie out of.
Oh, I saw that one. The one where he went gambling.
Or paid off his gambling debts or something.
Yeah.
It's throwing good money after bad. It's the gambler's dilemma. It's okay. He just needs more money. He just needs more money. And when you're paying $166 million to make two movies, and then Zack Snyder comes back and tells you, actually, I can give you 4, I guess Netflix just like, yeah, sure, why not? People love him on the internet.
I guess.
He's got a loud base of supporters, and I think that in itself will get this across the bar.
To be fair, it's been proven that his loud base of supporters ended up being a whole bunch of bots. And even when he was asked in recent interviews how he felt about it, he just went, oh, well, I guess it did the job.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
my version still got made. So I think it's true when people say vocal minority with a series of bots behind them. But for the most part, I think it'll be interesting to see how well Rebel Moon does, because even though Netflix has started releasing that sort of data, I still would like to dig down a little more and find out how much of this movie people actually watched, because that will be interesting. Even when they release the director's cut, besides a hardcore group of fans and film critics who have to do it for work, how many people are going to sit through a 4-hour version of this before moving on to watching another 4 hours of part 2? I have no idea. And I don't think that number is going to be massive.
I've sort of been snickered at for saying things like this. But if you watch Rebel Moon and you finished it and you didn't like it, give it the thumbs down. For Netflix being the data-driven company that they are, I can see in a world where they will look at that as an indication of how nobody liked it. If you just watched it and you then go on Twitter and tell people that the movie sucks, Netflix can spin that and say, look, people sat through this 2-hour movie. But I think if you finished it and then you give it the thumbs down, I believe that as data-driven as they may be, sure, they may not report it, but that is something they will take into account potentially for the next round of conversations with Zack Snyder.
I completely agree with you. I think we need to start a thumbs down campaign. If you are watching something on Netflix and you don't like it, use that button and use it wisely, use it frequently.
I think that if you just gave something a thumbs down without watching it, the algorithm will see that as, oh, don't recommend more things to me with like this. But if you watched it and then gave it a thumbs down, I think then you were actively telling Netflix that you didn't like that thing that you just saw.
We did a little listicle on our social media ranking Zack Snyder's movies. And it was an incredibly difficult listicle to do because we weren't ranking from worst to best almost. We were just trying to find the best out of a series of mediocre films. None of his movies are actually particularly exceptional. Even Watchmen, which might be his best film, was made tremendously better by the HBO series. So upon a rewatch, you might like that movie a lot more because of the work and the heavy lifting that was done by HBO's Watchmen.
I will argue that Watchmen and 300 were good movies because the script was written. The storyboard was prepared. He just had to essentially, I know this is not what it is, but he just had to stick a camera where the artist had drawn the panels at and then press record.
You say that, and most adaptations aren't, right? And
Yeah.
they cannot be, because even comic book adaptations, there's a lot that happens in between panels that is left unsaid. And so, even when you call a comic book cinematic, it's actually a misnomer, because it's a very different art form, making a film and writing a comic. But in this case, it feels like that is exactly what Zack Snyder did. It was panel for panel, frame for frame, a recreation of what was on the page. And maybe that's why it was so successful, because the thing that was on the page was already so solid.
Yes.
But Zack Snyder seems to be just white privilege personified, because you can continue making these mediocre things in Hollywood and still get money to make more mediocre things. Meanwhile, I think if you are a black director with one failure, you're screwed, right? They're never giving you any money anymore.
I've got some names I can drop, but I'll just leave that to myself. I just think that this might be Zack Snyder's last throw of the dice. Like, I can't think anybody else would give Zack Snyder money to make a Zack Snyder thing. M. Night Shyamalan can come back from Hollywood jail because his stories are written well. They're based on really good stories. Zack Snyder films are based around cool images. Only Netflix is going to give him money for that.
It feels like the Zack Snyder movie appeals to you when you're between 12 and 15 years old, when reading a comic means looking at the cool pictures and nothing else.
Yeah.
And I think that is symbolic of the way Zack Snyder processes these things, because even if you look at the way he's adapted Batman and Superman, it's like he's taken Frank Miller's work and only looked at the cool images and completely deprived them of context. Because when he uses those images on screen, it feels like he didn't read any of the words that went along with them.
Yeah.
But BVS is an incredibly violent film, and he's justified that violence. But if you actually read the comic is almost a tirade against violence. There's a reason Batman in the comic is using rubber bullets in his tank. Like, he gives up because he is fed up and he is tired and he's a bitter old man because of all of the violence and the stuff that he's been through his whole life. Like, it feels like he missed that point completely. And so I think a movie like Rebel Moon is going to appeal to people who just like pretty pictures. I think when you grow up and you grow older, you realize how shallow these things actually are.
Also, while we're talking about pretty pictures, why, oh why, is Zack Snyder shooting this thing with a tilt shift lens?
I have no idea.
Did you notice that? It's just like, why is this thing just, why? I thought we were done with that. I went on a rant last year or the year before. I think we're done with it, right? But no, obviously Zack Snyder's not done with it, because why is this thing in tilt shift? It's not cool, Zack. It's not cool.
I guess we're going to have to revisit this when part 2 rolls around.
I hope people don't ask us to revisit it when the director's cut of this thing comes out.
I feel like we should farm that out to one of our other writers.
Yeah.
Then again, we don't pay them enough. So
yeah, we don't.
They may just turn around and go, no, thank you.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe when I'm in a better mood, maybe I might watch that.
There's a part of me that's curious enough to wonder what it possibly could be.
Yeah.
And if by some really strange occurrence it ends up being a better movie, then why didn't they just release that first? Why put yourself through this? Why put yourself through the 9% Rotten Tomato rating if you knew that this was going to be a bad version compared to that? Because you're on Netflix. You're not selling tickets. You don't have to worry about how many screenings you're putting on a day. You can run a movie as long as you fucking want. Why didn't you just do it the first time?
I think that will be the only thing for me. My curiosity will get the better of me, and I want to know why that version is not this movie.
In the meantime, Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire, is now streaming on Netflix. Watch it if you feel that you must, but for the most part, I feel like it's 2 hours and 15 minutes of your life that may take 6 hours of your life to actually get through. Let us know what you think if you've seen it. Reach out on all of our social media feeds, Goggler MY. You can also email us on podcast@goggler.my or send us a WhatsApp on the Goggler hotline, 012-524-5208. If you drop us a line on any one of those channels, we'll send you a link to join our Discord server where you can chat with us in real time. Thank you so much for listening. This is the Goggler Podcast.